Alright, this is the story of Perseus and Medusa. This is Perseus, and that makes this Medusa. Well, what's left of her anyway. As you could probably tell from this statue, Perseus killed Medusa. Alright, the end. Just kidding. Before we get to the story, let's find out a little more about our main characters first. Perseus was the son of Zeus and Danae. Sorry about the quality of the photo. The Greeks loved portraits of naked women, and well, YouTube doesn't, so I had to crop it. Danae, Perseus' mother, was the daughter of Acrisius of Argos. When Perseus was just a baby, him and his mother were cast into the sea in a chest by his grandfather Acrisius. Acrisius had received a prophecy that he would be killed by his grandson, so he wasn't taking any chances. The chest landed on the island of Sepphoris, and that's where he grew up. Here, him and his mother met Polydectes, the king of Sepphoris. Polydectes desired Danae, and well, what's a better way to get the girl than tricking her son into a situation that could very well lead to his death? Polydectes tricked Perseus into promising to obtain the head of Medusa, who just so happens to be another major character in this story. A little background on Medusa. She was the only mortal Gorgon. She was once a beautiful woman, until Athena caught wind of her affair with Poseidon. Athena turned Medusa into a vicious monster like her siblings. She gave her snakes for hair, and a face that quite literally turned men to stone. Alright, now on to the story. It all began at a feast Polydectes threw. Polydectes, as I said before, was infatuated with Perseus' mother Danae, and wished to marry her. Perseus believed that Polydectes was less than honorable, so he kept her away from him. At this feast, everyone was expected to bring a gift. However, Perseus was unaware of this custom, so when he showed up empty-handed, he honorably asked Polydectes to name a gift, and he would not refuse him. Polydectes held Perseus to his promise, and demanded the head of the only mortal Gorgon, Medusa. Little did Perseus know, he'd been plotting this. He wanted to send Perseus on an impossible task to humiliate him, or better yet, kill him so he'd stop meddling in his plans of marrying his mother. Little did Polydectes know, Perseus was receiving an education fit for a hero, from Achilles, Hercules, Jason's, and Theseus' teacher, Chiron, the centaur. Athena decided to help Perseus on his task. After all, she has a vendetta against Medusa. She told him to seek out the Hesperide nymphs, who only I'm not even sure. Gray? Yeah, I'm not sure how. Hold on.
Gray.
Okay, Gray. The Gray were the only ones who knew where they lived, so he had to travel to them first. Hermes and Athena guided him to the far-off region on the borders of Oceanus where the Gray were living. When he asked them for the information he needed, they refused. He then stole their single eye and tooth and refused to give it back to them until they provided the information he needed. Obviously, they obliged and gave him full directions. He returned their eye and tooth and set off following their directions, and ultimately got to the land of the Hesperides, from whom he would obtain the crucial object needed for his quest. He received a bag to safely contain Medusa's head from the Hesperides. Zeus also gave him an adamantine sword and Hades' helm of darkness that would make him invisible. Hermes also lent him winged sandals to fly, and Athena gave him a polished shield. Perseus equipped all of his new magic items and used Hermes' winged sandals to fly to the land of the Gorgons. When he arrived, he found them fast asleep in their cave. As he was already warned, he faced away from the sleeping sisters, knowing that if he looked directly at them, he'd turn to stone. He used the shield as a mirror, so he could safely look at the Gorgons, and Athena guided him to Medusa, and in one fell swoop, cut her head clean off. He grabbed her head and put it in the bag the Hesperides gave him, and as soon as he did that, Medusa's headless body produced the winged horse Pegasus, who flew up into the sky, which awoke Medusa's sisters, who chased after Perseus, trying to avenge their fallen sister. He used his invisibility helmet and winged sandals to conceal himself from the pursuing Gorgons and fly away to escape them. As he passed over the land and sea, Medusa's head dripped blood. As it hit the sand, it produced many colored snakes, and as it dripped into the sea, it created coral reefs. He continued his flight until he reached the kingdom of Atlas, where he begged for rest and shelter. Atlas was protecting the garden of the Hesperides, where the trees produced golden fruit, so he was afraid to let the man who just killed the monstrous Medusa inside. He was nervous about what he might do to the garden. When he refused him, that irritated Perseus, who pulled out Medusa's head and promptly transformed the king into a mountain. His hair and beard erected into forests. His limbs became huge rocks, and his head became a rocky peak which stretched high up into the clouds. He then just continued on his travels, reaching the kingdom of Cephus. The country had been ravaged by disastrous floods. Everything was destroyed. On a cliff close to the shore, he saw a lovely maiden chained to a rock. It was Andromeda. Her mother, Cassiopeia, had boasted that she was the most beautiful in all the land, saying she was more beautiful than the Nereids. This caused the angry sea nymphs to appeal to Poseidon to retaliate, and the sea god did so. He devastated the country with huge waves, and with those waves came a terrible sea monster that devoured everything in its path. The people, in their distress, begged the oracle of Zeus Ammon to help them, to which they were told they had to sacrifice the king's daughter to save themselves from the monster. Cephas, her father, at first refused to listen. He loved his daughter, but his people begged and prayed, so he finally gave up the welfare of his child for the safety of his country. They chained her up as bait for the sea monster as her heartbroken parents watched from the beach below. After Perseus heard about the situation, he proposed to kill the monster, on the condition that Andromeda would become his wife. The king was overjoyed at his daughter's new chance at life, so he happily accepted. Perseus flew over to the terrified woman to give her some words of comfort, then quickly slipped on Hades' helm and turned invisible to wait for the monster's attack. When the sea opened, the gigantic beast's head peeked out, ready to attack the victim. At that moment, Perseus darted down, pulled out Medusa's head, and turned the beast into a huge black rock. Perseus then unchained Andromeda and led her to her very happy parents. They were very anxious to show their gratitude, and immediately ordered preparations for a wedding feast. Perseus then left the country accompanied by his new bride and returned to Seriphus to give Polydectes the gift he wanted. When he returned, his mother was nowhere to be found, and Polydectes refused to tell him where she was. He then pulled out Medusa's head, and Polydectes told him he locked her in the dungeon right before his head turned to stone. Perseus rescued his mother and sent word to his grandfather Acrisius that they'd be returning to Argos. Acrisius still feared the prophecy, so he fled to Larissa to hide out with a friend. Unluckily for him, though, Perseus followed him there. At Larissa, a strange accident occurred. While taking part in some funeral games, Perseus threw a discus that hit his grandfather and killed him. Guess the prophecy was right after all. After celebrating the funeral rites for Acrisius, Perseus gave the head of Medusa to Athena, who had acted as his divine protector in his quest. Athena placed the head of the Gorgon in the center of her shield. Later on, as would happen to demigods, Perseus' mortal half died, so he was taken to the heavens and became a constellation, followed by Andromeda and her mother Cassiopeia. Alright, the end.